With the Bible open to Deuteronomy, everyone, if you can get a copy of God's Word open, this book is a surprising book in that it has so much there. I want to just say that Rachel and I and the kids, the journey we've been on together with you has been an amazing journey. And some of you saw a post this week that there were some pictures from Colorado and Bear Lake out of Estes Park. And there was a picture of Rachel and me 34 years ago. I was about that big around, and she was a beautiful, beautiful young lady. Look, somebody said, man, was she like 12 years old when y'all married? Well, it's Arkansas. I mean, you can do things like that. But I did that because I don't want to ever forget where I came from. I don't want to forget how God brought me here. And no matter how life goes, and no matter how good things may be or how bad things may be, you got to remember where you came from. Never forget what got you to where you are today. That's what Moses is trying to say to them. And I remember those moments with Rachel. I remember those places, and they resonate with me. We didn't go there this week. We just remembered it this week. And what I want to talk to you about today is just remembering. With the Bible open to Deuteronomy, we're going to look at chapters 5, 6, 7, and then 8 is where we'll spend our time, just because this is the message that Moses is giving them. Let me put a map up to remind you where they are. They're about to cross the river. They are at the just north of the Dead Sea. And they're looking at Jericho across the river. They're looking at Ai across the river. They're looking at the Promised Land. And so he is preparing them to go in. He is not going in because of his disobedience, but he's getting them ready to go in. And so what he's going to say to them is, here's what you need to know before you get in there. Because when you get in there, it's going to be good. And God's going to bless you. And you're going to be tempted to forget where you came from. Memory is a big deal to God. Did you know that's why the festivals and the feasts are so carefully named and mentioned in the Old Testament? Why is Passover so important? Because they would remember God delivering them from Egypt. And so every one of the feasts and festivals, even the Lord's Supper that we as Christians participate in, when we hold that cup and that bread, remember, he said, as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, say it with me, this do in remembrance. We should never forget. Can you imagine what it'd be like if you just totally forgot? If you lost your memory. I know you think you're living with somebody they're forgetting, but I mean totally forget. By the way, I heard about one of the major car companies. They're making a new model called Amnesia. That's right. It's the only one they can't recall. Now, if you were to wake up, if you were so old, if you were to wake up, it shows you my memory's going, man. But I can remember stuff like that. If you were to wake up and not have any memory, and somebody had to sit you down every day and say, okay, let me tell you who you are. Let me tell you how you got here. But I want you to think about this. Every morning, you open this book, and he tells you who you are. And he reminds you how you got here. And he tells you about where you're going. And he woos you every day. Because the people of God have trouble remembering. We have trouble remembering how we got here. We have trouble remembering. So what does God do? He gives us ways to remember. That's what this is about. He's saying, remember. Moses is saying, when you get in that land, please don't forget. Remember. Chapter 5, he says, remember the law. Okay? So if you want to write these down, he says, remember the law. And that is a restatement of the Ten Commandments. He restates every one of the Ten Commandments in chapter 5. Then he comes to chapter 6 and he says, remember what matters most. Now let me just set it up for you. the law, the 10 Commandments they were given to help us. They were given God's people to make a difference and to guide us. They were guardrails. They were not to be oppressive. He didn't give them to restrict us. He gave us to free us. I mean, he really did give us incredible guidance to show us the way to live life. But then, as man typically does, we complicate things. And we add law upon law upon law upon law upon law. They ended up with 613 commandments. And so in chapter 6, Moses says, now, remember what matters most. Remember what matters most. And he reduces it to one simple command. It's called the Shema. That is the Hebrew word for hear, which is the first word in verse 4. These words that we're about to read, chapter 6, verses 4 and following, are the most important words to a Jew, a practicing Jew, in the entire Bible. In the entire Old Testament and anything that God's ever said, these are the most important. This is what a Jewish child would memorize first, the Shema. And it's something that they believe, and we ought to believe, is the essence of our faith. So think about it. He's getting them ready to go on this new land. He says, okay, when you get there, it's going to get complicated. It's going to get busy. It's going to be crazy. So I want you to remember what matters most. And verse 4, look with me, chapter 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently, your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. In other words, Israel, no matter what happens, remember what matters most. Love God. He is one. In fact, if you were to take the Hebrew of this, by the way, every synagogue service starts with this. This is that sacred piece of faith that is the essence of what they were about, and really the essence of what we're about. If you take the Hebrew of this, here's what the way it would read in Hebrew. Yahweh our God, Yahweh one. The reason for it is they were about to go into a land where they had many gods. I mean, literally, they had many gods. Everybody, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, all the ites, they got gods, a bunch of gods. And he wanted them to know, you only have one. I was talking to a person one time who came out of a background of polytheism. Monotheism is what we call the worship of Israel. It's our faith. We have one God. But there are polytheistic peoples on the earth. And this person said, yeah, but we have many gods. That's much better. I said, no. We have a God, and he's so awesome, that's all we need, just one God. And it was so eye-opening for this person to think we only have one God. And yes, we only have one God, and you know what he wants? He just wants you to love him. He wants you to love him. Jesus actually quoted this law when he was asked by the scholar, the lawyer, what's the greatest commandment? And out of 613 commandments, Jesus picked one. Which one? This one. He said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And you remember what he said about that? He added, you shall love your neighbors yourself. Do you remember what he said about this law? He said, the law and the prophets hang on this. That basically means, hey, if you love God with everything you are, you'll have it all right. It'll all be right. Everything hangs on this. Do you love him with everything in your being? So Israel, remember what matters. Teach your children. When you sit down with them, when you rise up, teach them. In fact, bind this to you. You got to see this picture. If you've seen pictures of Jews of that day, Israel would often wear a phylactery, which is like a box or something, and they'd put it right here on their head, and they would tie it with a strap. You know what was in that? This scripture. The Shema was in there. And then they would use mezuzahs, because he says to write it on the doorpost of their homes. Let me show you the mezuzah. It's simply something that holds the scroll where this verse is written. Now, this is a gift from a great family in this church, and they honored me this week when I was looking for a mezuzah. I couldn't find mine. I brought one back from Israel, couldn't find it. They gave me this, and they said, we want you to have this, you and Rachel to have it. This is actually a very beautiful one, ornate one. Some of them are just plain. But here's what they do. They roll a scroll up in this mezuzah, and then they put it on the doorpost. And if you've been to Israel or if you have Jewish friends, watch what they do. They'll put it right there. They'll nail it or they'll screw it in right there. And it's made in such a way that you can look into it and you should be able to see the first word here. Shema is the Hebrew word. You should be able to see that because it's a reminder to listen and remember that the Lord your God is one. You're to love Him with everything. And when they come in the door or out the door, what do? They touch it. They touch it. I've seen doors that are literally worn concave because of so many people touching it, coming in and out. We were in Israel once in Jerusalem, and there was a little school that had recess, and every one of these boys and girls, man, they must have been that tall. I mean, like first graders, second graders, and they come running out the door, and every one of them touched it as they ran out. The rabbi said you ought to put it on every door in the house. The only door in the house they didn't put it on was the bathroom door. But every other door, every time you go in, you touch it. Why? To remember. You see how God wants us to remember? You remember. You remember that He's one, and you remember that what matters most is that you're to love Him with everything you are. Now, chapter 7, remember you are special to God. You are special to God. Chapter 7 says one of the most beautiful things about Israel, and it's true of us, followers of Christ, who've been grafted in. We are special to God. Now, why would this be important? Well, they're about to go into a land where they're going to have to fight. They're going to take some tough losses. It's going to be hard. When you go through change, when you go through a season when things aren't the same, man, you got to go back to something that you remember. And here's a good one. You're special to God. Don't ever forget that. Never forget it. I want you to read with me, chapter 7. Look, if you will, at verse 6. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for His treasured possession out of all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. It was not because you were more in number than any other people that the Lord set His love on you and chose you, for you were actually the fewest of all people. But it is because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that He swore to your fathers, that the Lord has brought you out with a mighty hand. He's redeemed you out of a house of slavery from the hand of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Know therefore, the Lord your God is God, the faithful God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love Him and keep His commandments to 1,000 generations. Now let me just stop right there. Basically, Moses is looking at these people going, you got to remember something and never forget it. You are special to God. You're not like everybody else. You were chosen. And God did not choose you because of who you are. He chose you because of who He is. You weren't mighty. You weren't bigger than everybody else. In fact, Israel, you were smaller. So then why did God choose you? Because He loves you. Why did He love you? Because He loves you. That's what Paul says. I mean, Paul says the same thing. Romans 9, 10, 11, that section, he affirms over and over. The reason God chooses us is not because of us. It's because of Him. Do you know the difference that makes in your life? When you hear Moses, he's leaving. He's leaving. He's not going to be with them. And it's like He takes them by their face and He holds their face and He said, Israel, you got to remember this. He chose you. You're special to Him. He chose you not because there's something about you. No. There's something about Him. And one day you'll understand that, but never forget, you are special. You are a chosen people. You're a royal priesthood. And that's what God has said to His people who are followers of Christ. We've been grafted in. We are now a part of the chosen people that God calls His own, His special treasure. And you know what that says to me? Number one, never be arrogant or prideful that you're a follower of Christ. Never be arrogant. Never be proud. And never think, oh, it's because of me. No, it isn't. And secondly, never look down on somebody else. Never look down on another to say, oh, well, I'm better than any. No, we're not better than anybody out there. We have just been given the grace of God. And therefore, we cherish it and we share it. We don't look down on people. How could we? Where you are today, you didn't get there by yourself. The fact that you're a follower of Christ, that wasn't about you, that was about God. So there's nothing we can boast in. Paul said, I will glory only in the cross of Jesus Christ. That is the only thing I'll ever boast about, is that Jesus loved me and he gave himself for me. That's it. That's all I got to boast about. So I can't look down on somebody. And you know what else? It means I ought to get up every day and thank God that he chose me. Thank God that he loves me. Thank God that he has blessed me. Never take for granted that you belong to the King of the ages and you are his treasure. That's what he's saying to him. Remember that. And then the last thing, remember who blessed you. Chapter 8. Remember who blessed you. Look at verse 2. And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. And he humbled you and he let you hunger. And he fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. Your clothing did not wear out on you. Your foot did not swell these 40 years. Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, the Lord your God disciplines you. So you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. In other words, don't ever forget who blessed you, who got you where you are today. In my office, somebody did this for me because they've heard me say it so many times. There is a picture in my office of a turtle on a fence post. Because you know the saying, if you ever see a turtle on a fence post, you know he had help getting there. Ladies and gentlemen, may I confess to you, I had help getting here. I did not get here by my own. The Lord was with me. The Lord gave me grace. The Lord gave me mercy and allowed me to be the pastor of a great church. Let me tell you, Andy Westmoreland, he didn't get to Samford on his own. He'll be the first to tell you it was by God's grace, because what Andy has to offer you, I know. I was in college with him. If it's just Andy, you don't want it. If it's just David, you don't want it, right, Andy? No. But if it is the grace of God through Andy, through David, yes, it's a beautiful thing. All I'm saying is never forget who blessed you. He says to them, God fed you. When you were hungry, God gave you manna. You know what manna is? We don't know. Because if somebody knows, I sure like to talk to you. The name manna means, what is it? When I get to heaven, after a few thousand years, I'm going to go up and say, Jesus, would you show me some manna? Because I'm just dying to see what that looks like. I've seen it described in all kind of ways. I personally think it was a bunch of pancakes just laying on the ground. They just picking them up, man. They got syrup and butter and all that on them. I just think the Lord fed his people. And he did it with something good, manna. And then he says, your feet didn't swell. What's that about? You're on a journey, you're traveling, you're a wilderness, you're a nomad, and yet I took care of your feet so your feet didn't get infected and they didn't swell. I was with you. I'm the one who did that. You didn't do that. And your clothes, they didn't wear out. In other words, you woke up, went to bed, same clothes, and they never wore out. Why? Because I am the one who got you where you are. You say, but man, we went through some hard times. Yeah, you did. But guess what? Like a father disciplines his children, I was there to help train you. Discipline with our God is not like our discipline. Sometimes our discipline is punishment. That's not God's discipline. God's discipline is training. It's training in righteousness. It's the discipline that a player, an athlete goes and works out in the weight room. Is that punishment? No, that's training. That's getting better. Every time you go through a hard season, that's like God helping you get better and stronger. And he said, I'm the one who was there for you. So remember who blessed you, who got you here. And then he says, and remember who's going to bless you. Remember where you're going. Look at verse 11. Verse 11 says, back up to verse 7. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, fountains, springs, flowing out in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land in which you will eat bread without scarcity, in which you will lack nothing. I love that phrase. You're not going to lack anything. A land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper, and you shall eat and be full, and you will bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. In other words, Israel, you're going to be blessed. It's going to be good. You're going to have copper that you can dig and make all kind of stuff out of copper. You're going to have food. There's going to be water flowing everywhere. They've been in a desert for 40 years. And he says, you're going to have water. You're going to have everything you need. And you're going to bless the Lord. Now, I know this is a really pitiful comparison, but there's a reason for it. Guys, we're about to go through a season here, all out, where we're going to be going in different services. The reason you have that card is to really help us know how to prepare for that season. It's going to be different for us. We're not going to be able to do the things that we get to do in here because we just don't have the places that are big enough and equipped in a way that we can do service like we do here. But you know what? We want to be ready. And we want it to be great. So here's what I'd like for you to do. Sometime in the next few moments, which service time would you most likely attend? Which service time would you most likely attend? Doesn't mean you have to go there. You're not even going to put your name on it, so it won't really matter. It's not like we're checking rolls saying, whoops, you went to the wrong service, sir. That'll cost you an extra 5% on your tithe. No. We're not doing that. We just want to be ready. Because let me show you something. When we come back in here, oh my goodness. It's not going to be quite like the promised land with milk and honey and flowing springs, but it's going to be a beautiful place. Can I show you a picture of it? Now, you got to make me a promise. Do not hold me responsible for what you're about to see as the color goes, okay? We're having trouble finding new mauve carpet. We're looking real hard, but just kidding. Strike that from the record. I did not say that. Seriously, they're making final selections. The building committee is doing an awesome job. I begged them, could I show a picture? And they said, absolutely. And I want to just show you a couple of pictures because it's a beautiful thing that's going to be in here. These are a couple of pictures, renderings, if you please. That is obviously from the platform looking out. And I know some of you are already looking to find your seat. And you're going to say, there it is. Now, there's another picture from up in the top that really gives you a really cool look. Now, you notice the screen is going to be much bigger. There's going to be actually the seats that are right there where that camera is, this camera, that big aisle that goes across there. The seats there begin to go up, and that's kind of like a terrace seating in that area, which means all the area underneath the balcony now all becomes lobby space. It'll be a huge space, 3 times what we have now, to be able to enjoy one another, sit and talk, or whatever it is that we have to do out there. Be a great place for that. And let me show you the seats. You will think you're in the promised land when you sit in these seats. I'm telling you, the committee did a great job. They looked at pews, they looked at seats, they looked at every option available, and not the color, but the style of seat is what they have selected. Now, I will tell you this. These things are really, really nice. And when you sit in them, oh my goodness, there was an option that the committee turned down. There was an option that had a headrest that came up a little higher. And they said we would never keep our people awake if we had that. So for the fear of falling asleep, they said this will be fine. And let me tell you something. I will be watching. Remember my plan. We have a camera who has one assignment: find people sleeping, video it. And if I ever need to show you that video, I will. I'll bring it out. These seats are absolutely beautiful. They really are nice. They're very comfortable. Now, why would I tell you all this and show you this? I just want to show you what's coming. But here's the reason. We're going to walk in there and we're going to say, oh my goodness. We're going to look and it's going to be beautiful. But here's my concern. Do not forget where we came from. May we never forget who blessed us. Who is the one who has carried us since 1871? This church was birthed in 1871, long before Disney thought about coming, long before any of the other parks came, long before Orlando was a destination city. God knew there would need to be a church that would welcome the nations. And so in 1871, He formed a body of Christ, and He has protected her, He has carried her, and He has been the one who has been with us every step of the way. And I don't want us to ever forget, even though we may enjoy the beauty of something and we may really appreciate where we are. He says, don't forget who blessed you. And read on with me. Verse 11, take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping His commandments, His rules, His statutes, which I command you, lest when you have eaten and you are full, and you've built good houses and you live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply and your silver and gold is multiplied, and really all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt in the house of slavery. Verse 17, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth, that He may confirm His covenant that He swore to your fathers as it is to this day. You know what my concern is? When we are blessed. Moses said, when you get to that land and everything multiplies and everything increases and you build nice homes, you have a nice worship center, you got nice seats, you got nice everything. Two things. Number one, don't let your heart be lifted up and think you deserve this. Don't let your heart be lifted up. I think that is one of the dangers of blessings. When we have things, when we have been blessed, one of the dangers is our heart is lifted up and we think we deserved it. Somehow we look to the heavens and we're pretty proud about it because, hey, look what God did for us. We deserve this. No, we didn't. You and I deserve hell on our best day. We deserve hell on our best day. The reason we have an inheritance in heaven, the reason we live an abundant life is not because we deserve it. It's because God in His mercy and grace has given it to us. And we never forget that. Give the Lord praise for what He's given to us. That's a gift. That's from Him. And the second danger, you'll think you did it. You'll think by my strength, by my arm, I did this. And Moses said, no, you didn't. The Lord gave you wealth. He gave you the strength to have wealth. He gave you the ability to earn wealth. I know we're going to be tempted to look back and say, wow, we raised $52 million. No, we didn't. God gave us the ability to give $52 million. We're going to look back and say, well, this is what we were able to do. No. We didn't do anything. It was our God who was gracious who did it through us. I've been to people's businesses, their homes, and I know they probably didn't mean this. But they were walking around and saying, well, let me show you what I did. I did this here, and let me show you about this. I built this, and I did that, and I built that. Under my breath to myself, I'm going, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. I don't say it out loud. But I just think to myself, no. God did that for you. Do you realize the very breath you have in your lungs right now is a gift from Almighty God? And the job that you've got, that's a gift from God. And some of you say, man, mine's a pitiful job. Well, He's got another one coming. Just hang on, all right? Everything we have is a gift. And the warning for them is the warning to us. When we're blessed, when we enjoy what we have, be careful that we don't lift our heart and say we deserved it or think that we did it by our might. No, it was the Lord. It was God. Give Him all the glory and all the praise. Remember, God has been good to us. Now, if we don't, yes, give Him praise. If we don't, verse 19, and if you forget the Lord your God, and you go after other gods, and you serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you today. That's like us saying, I solemnly swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Listen to what God says. I solemnly warn you today, you shall perish. Like the nations the Lord makes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. To be honest with you, I'm very concerned about our nation. For some reason, we have thought that we are better than all the other nations in history. And we are a free people, and yes, we are very thankful. And yes, we have found out the secret to a democracy and a republic where people get to participate in a representative government. And yes, I think that is the greatest form, and it's the best thing that could happen. But if we think that we are above the judgment of God, we will become like the other nations who perished before us if we forget the Lord our God who blessed us. May God help us. May God help us to remember. And we, the people of God, may God help us to remember. So, you know what? Let's put the videotape in again. Let's sit on the side of the bed. And let's watch the story again. Who are we? How'd we get here? And the answer is pretty simple. The Lord has blessed you.